Hello, I'm Becher Townshend and welcome to Foncast, Tasmania's top-rating political podcast. Well, I'm back and we've got the old band back together.
But you've lost something, Beach. Where away?
Yes, that's right. My beard has gone missing in action. Joining me today to discuss the never-boring, always-changing world of Tasmanian politics is the Mercury's chief political reporter, David Killick.
Great to be here.
Newly liberated ex-political apparatchik, Alex Johnston.
Liberated. Yes, well, I went to Parliament last night to clean up my desk and I don't have a desk, so I feel extremely liberated.
Bureaucracy can move fast sometimes,
Yeah,
can't
the
it?
ruthless efficiency of the parliamentary process. And, of course, my trusty sidekick and partner in crime, Brad Stansfield.
So happy to have you back, Beach.
Thanks, Brad.
The phone's been running hot. People asking, where is Beecher?
Well, the next thing they'll go, where'd he leave his beard? I left it
Yeah.
somewhere in Ireland. Anyhow, now the question everyone is asking, what has this all been about? And has anybody got a Tasmanian government hiding under their chair?
No, I don't think we have. But, Beach, I do have something hiding under my chair.
Oh, do you? What's that?
I have procured
A
present for Mr. Johnston because I know how
Look at that.
he likes.
For
And
those listening on the pod, this is hopefully a triple XL.
I think it's large. Should be okay.
A large, or maybe it's an aspirational Taz and Short jacket. A little bit like the policy itself, it'll take some time before, it actually comes to fruition. Thank you.
I think
Brad.
you've got to give it a crack.
That's great.
yeah.
I'll do that at the end of the episode.
Don't wear it. It's going to be worth something.
Many thanks
soon.
to the sponsorship of Liberal State Director Sam McQuestion for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. All right, so today is D-Day. The morning the result of the election will officially be declared at ceremonies around the state, and then this afternoon the Electoral Commissioner, we think, will toddle out to Government House and return the writs, or at least fax them through. And then I think the general expectation is that the Premier will visit the Governor and advise that he be recommissioned. Brad?
Yeah, that's right. I think at this stage we are going to get at least a month or so of the glorious fifth term of the Hodgman, Rockliff, Gutwin Liberal government. On the wrong order, but I know some of those terms are a bit like miniature dog years, but that is still 5 terms, 5 elections. I think expectation is Jeremy will go out and see Barb either later on today or probably more likely early tomorrow, I think, depending how long things take to get finalised today. And then, consistent with precedent, 2010, 1989, he will be recommissioned despite not having 18 votes signed, sealed and delivered. I know that's bad news for the ABC, who were busy promulgating that myth a few weeks ago, but at least they've now caught up and all agree that is the likely outcome today. It'll then, Beach, be up to the Parliament when it resumes in early September, is my understanding, very early September, as to whether or not the reign of the Liberals continue past that 4 weeks or whether we have a change in government to a winter independent green minority government. Time will tell, and I think that clearly lies squarely in the hands of those independents who have yet to declare their hands, of which there is a few.
Yeah, okay, all right. Before we look at how that might play out, let's look back a bit, David, without going over too much old ground. The finalisation and completion of the count took place on Saturday. Basically the same result for the major parties, but with some new faces, some missing faces, and the final rights delivered over the Jackie Lambies network.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the count shake out over the course of last week. Sort of really nail-biting battle in Clark between Madeline Ogilvie and Simon Barakis, and then
You haven't forgotten him already. That's
I feel sorry. So many names and faces.
Poor
and
old Simon.
things. And that was I think that was a coin toss that could have gone either way. With the number of votes that was in it. And then it was really just down to Bass and Lyons and what happened with those 7 seats there. I think there was a reasonable sentiment that the shooters, fishers, farmers was going to get up in Lyons. So congratulations to Carlo De Falco there. And I think in Bass that Labor really had a hope that they were going to improve on their result there right until very late in the piece. The feeling was that they were in play for that, but we have a new independent, Mr. Razay.
Happy doctor or something, is that right?
He's a professor.
Most interesting chap.
Professor,
Yeah,
I found him a breath of fresh air on the radio yesterday. I thought he was great.
We've got some really interesting, we've gained a council worker, we've gained a former ABC journalist, we've got a doctor, we've got some people with very interesting life experience joining our parliament, and I suspect we'll be richer for it.
Yeah, well...
Said with a straight face.
Right, well...
Democracy in action. It's great.
Alex, while we've got you as your newly liberated man about town, what happened with the Lambies?
Well, very interesting indeed. How far do we want to go back? I was listening, just as an aside, on the way in to the podcast we recorded following the last election. It wasn't that long ago, but it feels like I've mellowed somewhat since then. I was really getting at Brad, but I would recommend people go back and listen to it, because even though it was only 13, 14 months ago, it's extraordinary to listen to that conversation about how government was going to form after that election in the context of now. I won't go into all the details, but please go back and have a listen, because, it's fascinating. Now, the Lambies. Now, one of the things that Brad said during that podcast, that's why I brought it up, was that Jackie Lambie in that period had talked about stability and wanted the 3 MPs, and that was why I was very interested in the role. I saw that it was an opportunity to show that a minority government could work.
Yep.
So I went in with that mindset, and obviously things didn't go very well. Now, I take responsibility for a lot of the failings. I'll get to some of those soon, but I don't take responsibility for the friction, I guess, between the senator and the MPs. And I've got a lot of time for Jackie Lambie, so I don't want to make this sound too critical, but she had such a golden opportunity to consolidate those 3 MPs, and then, because I think this election shows there is an appetite for that middle right or middle alternative party that the shooters and fishers have really capitalised on this time.
Yep.
And I thought, Jackie Lambie did what Clive Palmer failed to do. She got 3 people elected to the parliament, and then of course history shows that it broke down. And and then Andrew Jenner, of course, was the opposite of stability, and was very eager to vote for the no confidence motion. So that's a little bit of context. And in terms of the election result, obviously Rebecca Pentland decided to run as an independent. Miriam Beswick decided to run as a Nats. I don't think it's a secret that the Nats were talking to absolutely everyone.
Yep.
So in the campaign, I spent more time with Rebecca just because I wasn't involved in the Nationals campaign. I kept talking to Miriam, and we made a couple of errors, and I do take responsibility. Being in the ungrouped column, I think, could have been costly. Looking at George Razay's result and the amount of preferences he got, I think that was an oversight, and it wasn't. It was just one of those things that was naivety. And it's funny, even though I've been around politics a long time, I didn't even think that was something that I needed to talk to Beck about. And I really do regret that. And I've said to Beck that I take responsibility for that, because as the person in the team that had been around politics the longest, that probably was my call. But it just didn't even dawn on me that an independent can get all those signatures so they get their own column. I should have known that. I put my hand up. So I think that was costly. She got a few preferences from the other people in the ungroup column, but I think if she was on her own, I'm not saying it would have made an enormous difference, but I think it would have put her closer to George Razay, and then she would have been in the mix.
Okay.
But Beck's attitude, I'll tell you this, Beck's attitude towards not being successful and re-elected has just been brilliant. She's got a 2-year-old, she's got 2 young boys as well. She's just like, it's what's meant to be is meant to be. So it's been beautiful.
Okay,
and
Sarah.
yeah, I just feel sorry for some of the staff that have now got to find new roles. I think I'm a bit of a political cockroach. I think I'll be okay, but we'll see anyway. But my thoughts go out to everyone affected. And we mentioned Simon Barakis before. Like, you get elected, you don't plan for a 1-year stint. It could be 2 or 3, but 1 is just beyond the pale. So.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, I think that covers it. And in terms of Miriam, the call to go with the Nats, she did because she really wanted that team atmosphere. They just didn't have very long to get their act together. So she relied on them having momentum, and it just never came during the campaign.
Oh, well, I worked with Miriam prior to her coming into Parliament, and I hope she goes back to her old role. She was quite good in that sector. Pardon?
Where was that?
It was in waste management and those kind of things. So
I'm sure she'll stay in public life in some form. She's got a voracious appetite for legislation and detail, so I wish her and Beck all the best.
Well, we've also lost a couple of other people. Simon Wood's gone. Casey Farrell's gone. I'm hoping we'll see that's not the end of Casey Farrell in terms of his political career. I would suggest it's not. Nick Street has lost his seat as well. We mentioned Simon Barakis, and I would hope and encourage Simon to come back as well as Casey. And then, of course, we can't not have this discussion without talking about Peter George in terms of his absolutely stellar performance down there in Franklin. What do we make of it, David?
It's really interesting to reflect on the fact that we now have two MPs in state parliament whose major issue is capitalising on the vote that is a reaction to the mishandling of the salmon industry in this state. The Greens, in as much as they're a reaction to the mishandling of environmental issues, in particular, dams and the like. We're now starting to see a solid block of anti-salmon MPs. So it's interesting.
Is it a mishandling, or is it just that there's always going to be, a protest block that's ready to be harvested?
Is it a protest vote, though? I think that when you get to the point when, you're getting, how many votes do you get down in Franklin there? When you're getting that many people.
2 quotas.
Yeah, I see, and I'm happy to have the argument, but I think when you see, 6 or 7% of the vote floating around the joint for independents or protest parties or, the Lambies or shooters, farmers, fishers, that's all very interesting. But when you get an independent running on a single issue, I appreciate the campaign had significant outside funding and support and all the rest of it. But we've seen Craig Garland, we've now seen Peter George. It just shows that, I think, with a little more deftness and a little more, taking on board some of the public sentiment, and I think there was always a hotbed of opinion, anti-salmon opinion down the channel. I think that's now spread down the eastern side of the Derwent, along the southern beaches there. I think there's a real block there, and I suspect that, a little bit less of a tone-deaf approach from successive governments may have made things a bit easier politically. But, he's here to stay. He's got some pretty strong opinions and a fair idea of what he's after. So it's going to be an interesting Parliament.
Yeah, well, I suppose, I observed the second half of the election campaign from afar, over in Ireland, and I've got to say it was quite a disappointing election campaign for me to watch. I've got to firstly congratulate the Liberals on running an excellent campaign and really congratulate
Alex
them.
can give you a quote on your insurance if you like.
Yeah, well, I'd be keen actually. My house insurance is up soon, and I'm very keen to get a quote. So if you can't, I'll just ask any Liberal member that I bump into over the next 2 or 3 months.
It just dawned on me, maybe the jacket is, I'm the new media guy for TazWater.
You just anointed,
Fantastic.
Okay. No
GBs, they pay well.
Yeah, I tell you, well, I used to do the PR for Amy for many years and did a bit of work with RACT, so I can give you a few tips. Anyhow, I did find it disappointing. I found Labor's performance quite disappointing. I think they had a few opportunities to really show that they could be a point of difference in the Tasmanian market, and for whatever reason chose to sort of me to it on the stadium and those kind of things, which was very disappointing. They took a brave stand on the finances, I've got to say. We backed it in from the TCCI's point of view, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough, whereas the Liberals came out with TazInsure, which was a fantastic policy from a cost of living, really tapping into what the community were worried about and getting out there with getting out there and dealing with the real world. To get a swing to them, as I say, congratulations. It was a good campaign. But now, we have a parliament. I mean, and it's a ridiculous parliament in my view. We have 24 people in that parliament that nominally support the stadium out of 25 members.
So don't forget your mate David.
That's 25 members out of a 35-member parliament to support the stadium, but the stadium's probably going to be up for discussion. I know we'll discuss that later in the episode. You couldn't have an episode of Foncast without that, or, dare I say it, the TT line. But really, it was an opportunity for Labor, and they missed it, which is disappointing. The irony is, it'll be yet to be seen where we go in terms of government. Brad?
Well, look, I haven't got a lot to add. As I previously said, obviously it was a really great campaign by the Libs and a pretty ordinary one by Labor, to be frank.
Yep.
I just think it is one of those vagaries of the Hare-Clark system. I know everyone always say it's a great system, but when you have one side increasing their vote by 3.2%, the other side losing their vote by 3.1% statewide, and you get the same number of seats, does sort of raise the eyebrow too between the two of them. But as it is, look, there's a 14-point gap between the primary vote. I think you said last time, Alex, last election it was slightly less than that. It was
37-29, I think.
So it's now blown out to sort of basically 40-26. That's a big gap. But here we are. Labor, amazingly, still are a chance of forming government, despite all that. Lowest vote in 100 years, but
there it is.
Cares?
Yeah, Alex.
Well, that's the debate I'm looking forward to, but let's run through a few of the things that you guys brought up. Peter George, now, Beach, you and I had a fairly frank exchange after the federal election because I thought that just showed that he would win a seat, and as David said, you sort of play down, I guess, how big an issue salmon was. Do you concede that it's a bit bigger now? Or?
No, I didn't play it down. What I said was it was an opportune issue for Peter George to run with, and I still argue that. And I still argue that the reality is in Tasmania we have these industries, we have successful industries, and there will always be a group of people in the community that, for whatever reason, choose to say that the negative impact of those industries are such that those industries should be brought to an end.
And I think what's interesting, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but there's already an anti-salmon party in Franklin. The leader's there. The Green leader is in Franklin. And so the fact that he was able to get elected with such a huge vote says to me it's about more than just...
Oh, of course. No doubt.
Yeah, and I agree.
But after the federal election, the argument was, well, maybe he doesn't go so well in the state election because he was up against the Greens leader instead of a candidate that was ineligible, and I think he surpassed my expectations. I didn't expect him to get a vote like that.
Well, I think if you look at it, the Greens would have nearly got 2 quotas in the last federal election under a state system. So there was always a strong vote there in Franklin anyhow. I think that was something that was pointed out to me after we had that discussion. But yeah, my view hasn't changed, and I think really, what Peter George has shown is there's a more nuanced position around some issues, and that you can capitalise on it beyond the ground that the Greens actually have. So there's more room there, not less.
Yeah, did he? I'm not sure exactly how much he ended up taking off the Greens. Was it about 4% off?
Not massive.
It wasn't a huge amount. I thought beforehand, and I still think now, there were a lot of people who voted for Peter George who wouldn't vote for the Greens ever.
Yeah.
And decided to vote for him because he's a capital I independent.
And I suppose, you say, they capitalise on the mishandling of salmon. We'll put that aside. But basically, the Liberal vote was hardly changed in Franklin. The vote he got was, I think, broadly, 3/4 Labor, 1/4 Green. And I think that's how the preference vote reflected that. So,
and a few Liberals, because there was that fascinating stat that was it 19 people voted Peter George 1, Erica Betts 2.
It was about 92 in the end.
Yes.
I
Was it really?
miscalculated. So I miscalculated on the transfer
people?
value. It was a
the votes went
0.2
full
transfer value. So
So you're telling me there were
92
92 Tasmanians who put Peter George 1, Erica Betts. I want to meet them all.
me too. We should have a gathering.
When I was 19,
Huonville Town Hall.
Great dinner party.
When it was 19, I was
Peter and
thinking
Eric
dinner
both
party.
there.
Now it's got to be some sort of stand-up canapé sort of situation. But I was trying to put my head into why someone would vote 1 Peter George, 2 Erica Betts. And to me, a more serious point is it's a Liberal voter who has reservations with the salmon industry potentially.
Well, I think it was an anti-stadium Liberal vote.
all right.
Okay.
We can have that.
Well,
we can ring him.
All right.
Call into the show, please.
if you're one of those people who are listening, they would be a perfect guest to have on the Foncast.
would be.
Well, no doubt, hopefully.
You have to prove you did it. You can't just make it up.
Got door knocked by both and thought they were both absolutely charming.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. Keep it moving, Malik.
All
What
right.
did you have there?
So, look-
Alex had a couple other points.
Oh, yeah, a couple of other points. So, the Tas Insure, I've been thinking about this a lot because my gut reaction to it when it came out was negative, and then as it went along, it was clever in the way that it captured the debate for a few days. It also taps into this other thing that I saw during the leaders' debate, in that Jeremy Rockliff, someone who's been in this government at the either deputy or premier level for 11 years, has this uncanny ability to make it sound like he's not defending the government's record, and instead he's looking for solutions to things. And I think TazWater is a good example of that. It allowed him to get out and say, there's this problem, how do we fix it? Now, of course, others would say, well, you've had a long time to fix it. But Jeremy Rockliff is quite good at sort of looking ahead rather than just defending their record. So and I thought TazWater worked well there. Now, will it ever happen? Who knows? But I'm glad I've got the jacket. And David O'Byrne, Brad very comfortably returned,
Yes.
despite your nervousness. What changed there, do you think?
I was ever nervous about it.
Let's go back to the first podcast of the election campaign. You said he was in doubt. In fact, on the whiteboard, you almost had Labor
We have to
beating him.
check the tape on that. I'm not so sure I said that. No, I think you might be confusing me with somebody else. But no, comfortably returned pro salmon for the record. So there's lots of different
votes out
voices
there
down
on
there
the
in Franklin,
side.
isn't there? Yeah.
All right. Well, we might move on to the $13 billion question.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Kabam. For how long will this newly recommissioned Jeremy Rockliff Liberal government last? First, let's take a quick look at what the punters think from our good friends at Enterprise Market and Research Services, who undertook some research into this last week. And they found, and I'll just read you a couple of quotes from their media release of August 1. Tasmanian voters narrowly favour the formation of a Liberal government by 44% to 38%, according to an exclusive Enterprise Marketing and Research Services survey, which, with the undecideds removed, that the margin is 54% to 46%.
So pretty much what you'd expect from the result of the night, I would have thought, roughly.
Yep. Interestingly, now we've got some more voters to find, I think. While almost all 98% of Liberal voters at the recent election prefer the formation of a Liberal government, perhaps not a surprise, 21% of Labor voters also prefer this outcome, suggesting a reticence in that group to governing with Green support.
Well, I know where a few of those are.
Right.
Okay.
Because that's the conversation that I've been having.
Yeah.
And look, I try not to be hypocritical and say one thing privately, one thing publicly, and I've probably burnt some bridges over this.
Yep.
But that is a sentiment, that the primary result was not a legitimate path to government.
Yes.
And there will come a time when the party that has a smaller primary or less seats is the party best placed to govern. A better relationship with the crossbench, say, or momentum, but that result, I just don't think can be interpreted any other way. And sorry to interrupt, but while I'm on a roll, 2018, Hodgman beats Rebecca White. I was working for Labor. We were despondent on the night. You know, we had high expectations that Beck was really going to eat into. Liberal vote was 50%. Labor's vote was 32.5%.
Yep.
Now, to think 7 years later, against a government that's gone through premiers, ministers, the TT Alliance scandal, a budget heading towards $13 billion in deficit, that Labor's primary vote would go back, 6% from 32.
Yep.
The left-wing people I talk to are just like, we would love a Labor government, but this isn't the time to do it. Now, Dean's in a very tricky position because what's the answer? We'll get to that in a minute. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Keep going, Beach.
no. I think you're dead on, and it's definitely a sentiment that's been put to me as well. You know, is this really the time? The vote's gone backwards. You know, a little bit more time may position us better. Do you know what I mean? While we might not go to the polls, but we might be better positioned to do it. And interestingly, the third quote I was just going to read out was when asked the question whether Labor governing with Green support constituted a deal, 56% said yes, compared to 25% who are saying no, with about 19% unsure. So,
and I think that uninsured, getting it in everywhere. And I think the key point there is, because I made that point when I was on ABC Radio on Friday, and someone said, well, doesn't the people who are elected get to decide the government? Yeah. And I said, or basically push back against the primary vote being relevant. And it would be less relevant if parties went to an election saying, well, we'll work with whoever gets elected.
Yep.
But both major parties for since 2018 at least, have ruled out working with the Greens. So I think that is an important thing. If you go to an election and say, okay, we'll work with anyone who's elected, then I think all bets are off after the election. But it would be going back on a pretty strong statement.
Well, on that, Dean Winter sort of is arguing, well, the voters have had their say, and the numbers on the floor are the numbers on the floor, and there it is. David, how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. I was reflecting at the beginning of our conversation about how, we don't really even know when the Premier's going to see the Governor. We don't know what process is going to be applied. I think we have a very high tolerance for a very large degree of uncertainty in how governments are formed in this state. I'll park that. But, yeah, I'd really like to know when the Premier's going, what process is going to happen. Is the opposition leader going to be asked up? What's the timeline? What criteria are being applied? And, when will Parliament go back? These are all questions we don't know the answers to. And I think in a democracy, I think we're accepting a little bit of being kept in the dark on this. And I don't think that's desirable. I'll put that to one side. What do I think is going to happen? I think the consensus is that the likelihood is that the Rockliff government will continue until Parliament resumes. It's a question of what happens then. If I had to put money on a particular outcome, I don't think Labor's probably inclined to move a no confidence motion. I don't think the Greens would be inclined to move a no confidence motion. I don't think Jeremy Rockliff will move a test of confidence in himself. So if there is to be one on that first day of Parliament, I think it'll come from the crossbench if it comes at all. So that would be my bet. And if there's a test, very strong possibility that the sitting government will fall on the first day. Just
quickly before we throw to AJ, you could ask Government House. I think they're the ones who might answer some of those questions for you, Dave.
Yeah, there is an argument that there could be a little bit of proactivity here.
I'm just saying they could answer those questions.
Yeah, no, I think tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
first week of September, I think was my
was your
prediction. But with all due respect to your wisdom and knowledge, I shouldn't have to rely on.
Oh well,
I do.
Many people do. Anyhow, AJ.
Well, Craig Garland has said that he'd support a motion of no confidence.
Yep.
So whether he's prepared to move one or not remains to be seen. So that's an interesting point you raised there, David. Now, aside from my commentary on Labor's primary vote and why that puts them in a very tricky position, Dean Winter is in a terribly tricky position because declaring defeat and ruling himself out just hands, government to Jeremy Rockliff on a platter. And even Kevin Bonham has said that would be a terrible move, especially from someone who, moved the no confidence because they were deeply, angry about the direction of the government. So then to rule yourself out.
Yep.
And going back into opposition, basically giving the government supply and confidence doesn't seem like an option either. You become an impotent opposition. So every time I sort of have said to someone, surely Labor can't govern after that election result, they've said, well, what is Dean meant to do in this situation? Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think, put it this way. He's definitely giving it a crack. There is no doubt about that. And they have been giving it a crack, and they are going to keep on giving it a crack. So my understanding is, it may or may not be exclusive to this pod by the time we go to air, but they will be confirming today that they are, formally engaging, if you like, Labor that is, with the independents, with a view to trying to form or secure enough votes so that they could oust the government on the floor when Parliament resumes. To be clear, not the Greens, but the independents.
So you disagree with David that Labor would be open to moving no confidence?
I think they're very open to moving, and if they've got 18 votes locked in the can when they get to that point, yes. And I say my understanding is that they haven't given up the ghost on that. They are going to be working very hard to achieve that outcome.
It's a good approach, finding out how people are going to vote before you move the no-go.
It is very sensible.
I think that might be the learning out of this one, mightn't it?
Whether or not they can get those 18 votes, of course, is another question. Now, obviously, they've got 10. Mr. Garland has declared that's 11. I think you can count the Greens, just a hint, just a suspicion there, so that gets them to 16, and they need 2 more. Now, Christy Johnston, my sense would be, and I have no information on this, but if a no confidence motion was put on the floor, she would be a reasonable chance of supporting that motion. That would be my feeling. Can they get one more, you've got the happy doctor. My mail is he's more conservative than not, but who knows? There's the shooter who, Beach, as you pointed out to me last night, correctly, is a former member of the Labor Party, right-wing Labor Party. In fact, I'm told was formerly a member of Rebecca White's branch many years ago, so certainly has some sympathies with the Labor Party.
Yep.
And Dean Winter is from the right, of course.
Yep.
And then there's Mr. George. Now, I don't know Mr. George from a bar of soap. I do find his lecturing and hectoring that everybody has to compromise except him to be slightly grating. And I'm not sure whether everything he says is for show or whether he is actually serious about some of the things he's taking. But I don't think, despite his noise, that he can be taken as an automatic vote for Labor at this point.
Based on what Peter George has said publicly, I find it very hard to believe he would sign a deal with either side, based on his very high expectations on what would happen from a policy point of view.
But okay. So I suppose. Well, I'll wade in with my.
Just remember, he doesn't have. Just to be clear, people need to understand him. Or Craig Garland or Christy Johnson or the other two, they don't need to sign deals with other sides to change the government. All they need to do is support a no-confidence motion, which has as a second part of the motion, like in 89, and expresses confidence in Mr. Winter. They don't need to sign any sort of deal beyond that. They just need to vote.
And when you're sort of a high-minded person who's pure in thought, that's exactly the space that you might take, where you might go, well, I'm not going to sign anything, but look, to tell you the truth, the state needs a change. I'm of a view we need to get a new government in so we can get a broom through the upper levels of decision-making processes. Therefore, I'm happy to bring Labor in. And I think that's my sense of something that will occur at some point. What point that is, I can't really tell you, because I think it is down to those two independents. But the other elephant in the room in this whole debate is the budget. Where'd the budget go? It's disappeared. Who will be treasurer? If Jeremy is when Jeremy is recommissioned, we still don't have budget. So somebody's got to bring a budget down. Is that budget going to be any good? What was
you don't think Guy will be?
I don't know. It was a bit of a stinker at the time, Brad, and sort of triggered a few things that.
What are the other options in the Liberal ranks then?
Well, there's a couple of new and talented faces in the Liberal Party, isn't there? So
there's really only probably Eric would be the logical one. I would have thought if Guy
gets boned, as it were. Yeah,
Don. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
In terms of the budget, my understanding is obviously there will need to be a budget from either side later on this year. I'm hearing as late potentially as November, and then the question is whether that budget is a fulsome budget with all the roundtable issues taken into account, or whether it's sort of more like a mini budget with a more substantive budget next year, given we are already.
Is that an option? Is it?
Well, half the budget's already passed. I think with the supply bill, so that would be an option, because I think some of the decisions that are going to be taken are going to be pretty unpalatable.
Yeah, but I think there'll be a lot of pressure from the crossbench and the upper house. I mean, we've read Ruth Forrest's commentary. She was saying if not much would change in the budget, there'd be a riot. Surely there'll be an expectation of the Parliament, even if the budget's as late as November, that it signals a change of direction.
Well, it might signal it, but if you're going to talk about substantive change, like heaven forbid raising taxes, for example, you can't just drop that without doing a lot of work to lay the groundwork to make sure that actually doesn't result in your own government.
I'm not arguing with you, but
I think there will be more time. That's my sense.
Yeah, I think
for the substantive stuff.
Well, the reality is whoever.
Albeit the TCCI supports tax increases, I saw. Pete,
this board member. I am on their board, and I definitely do not support tax increases. But I am quite concerned from a business point of view about what's going on at the moment. We saw this decision over Marinus, and I'm glad that it's been decided in the positive. But I found it unbelievable that the government, is on fragile ground, jumped into the car, put it into drive, and started driving flat out towards the edge of the pier and giving.
Well, just quickly before we get to that, and I want to talk about it. Just one other thing I think is important we can have a look at, which is if Rockliff's recommissioned, he will be recommissioned, and if he survives the first day of Parliament, he's not going to have 18 votes locked in. He might get. David O'Byrne might end up signing another agreement with him if he gets confirmed. He might get the happy doctor, might get the shooter. He ain't going to get any more than that, I don't think, locked in. So I bleed blue, as people know, but I'm concerned that we'll have a government which literally could fall any day that Peter George wakes up and decides he wants to change the government. There's no certainty. There's no stability from a business investment point of view. Beach, I know you're concerned. Who does business deal with? With the Premier or the bloke that could be Premier tomorrow?
Well, and that's a great concern, and so from a business point of view, you've got to look at both the major parties and lock them both into a particular position, and then hope that the nuances between the two don't muck you around. It is quite disturbing when you talk about the budget, Alex. What you're basically saying is that Parliament will write the budget. Well, again, that creates a certain level of uncertainty that's quite concerning. The whole negotiation over Marinus was appalling. Frankly, and I was just building up to my little sort of thing before I was rudely interrupted. But where the Liberals they jumped into the car and they were going to drive it off the edge of the pier. The reality is, the Marinus decision was made, as far as I can see, in 2017, and we're still debating the bloody thing. It's a complete joke. And a reflection of how slow the bureaucracy move with these things. And really, it is quite a distressing situation that we're going to have politically. The budget, the reality is you can't cobble together a decent budget in a couple of months, which is what's going to occur. So any substantive moves within the budget aren't going to occur until May or June next year. In the meantime, from a business point of view, we have plenty of clients who are just ringing us up and scratching their heads as to what to do from an investment point of view, from an ongoing point of view. If you're in the salmon industry, you think about investing in your sector, you would be scratching your head, even though you have, theoretically, 25 members of 35 members supporting you.
I do have a view that these independents that sort of talk that they want to make sure the Parliament goes 4 years and they support stability and certainty, well, they can't just talk the talk. They've got to walk the walk. If they seriously do think that, well then... Yeah. If Jeremy gets recommissioned and Dean tries it on and fails, we'll then lock in behind Jeremy with some proper supply and confidence agreements so that we can go at least a couple of years. I mean, they can't just say it and then, as I say, wake up one morning and change their mind.
And at least set the boundaries for what is the normal operation of government, which, if I reflect back on 1989, there were some clear boundaries set where people could understand that they could govern within those boundaries. And if they chose to step out those boundaries, it's on for young and old. Might be no conference, might be an election or whatever, but we do need a bit of an understanding. And this is my challenge with Herr Clark, is we have a group of independents who sit on the edge, pick particular issues which are important to them, fair enough, important to members of the electorate, but play those issues off on the broader decision to vote to govern for the whole of Tasmania and to make decisions for the whole of the state. And that's why I keep on making the point. 25 out of 35 members are actually agreed on some positions here, yet we can't move forward on these issues, and it's quite disturbing that that's what we've got to do. And from a business point of view, if investment slows, we've got a real issue. I was only reading a report in The Australian saying that the government at a national level is creating more jobs than industries. Just shocked all the
viewers to know that you read The Australian.
Yes, it is. Yeah, there you go. But what I'm getting at is that, if bureaucracy and government's creating more jobs than industry is, well, it's going to have a negative impact because we've got to pay those wages anyhow.
Anyway, I agree completely. We have to make this Parliament work. We can't keep going back to elections.
Yep.
And it's a two-way street. So I agree with independents have to act responsibly. They have to act fiercely for the people that put them there, and really agitate for change on the issues that they care deeply about. But every issue can't be an ultimatum that dangles over the government's head to bring it down. That is not the way to make it work. Equally, the government needs to realise that whoever it is, that these people represent a lot of people in Tasmania, so they'll need to give some ground on some issues in a sensible way that doesn't completely undermine business confidence or anything like that. And they need to change the tone. We need to change the tone that we talk about our political opponents, because I think the reason Jeremy Rockliff, one of the reasons that he is having trouble getting a lot of votes locked in, is that the tone at the back end of the election campaign was the same as we've always heard. These independents are economic vandals. I think that has to change, because how do you start a good relationship on that foot?
Yeah, and it was interesting, like you say, it bled through from the tail end of the election campaign and some of those shrill press releases that you see where you're branding people radical left-wing, independents one day and you need their support the next. And I think it also bled into the way that the Marinus Link thing played out. Maybe that's our segue. But, there was you detected from both sides an attitude that perhaps dates back to a kind of gentler time when majority government was a realistic prospect. I think, probably in the current environment that time has passed. And I think...
But just sorry to interrupt. You cannot campaign if you are a major party on anything but the basis that you're going to form a majority
agreed wholeheartedly,
Absolutely.
but you need to act, I suspect, in this current climate we live in with a little more humility and a little more openness to consultation than I think we saw, in particular, as a textbook example on the handling of the Marinus Link.
Decision. That's an absolute case study in how not to handle it. Hold a gun to people's heads and then force them to make a decision that they may or may not want to make. It's quite disturbing.
I'm not talking about praising your opponents or sitting around and singing Kumbaya. I'm just saying. I'm just saying you've got to think, as David said, you've got to think about how do you create a relationship with people that you're going to need to make government function ahead of time.
Yeah, but I think some of these independents need to grow up a bit and live in the real world. I mean, come on. I mean, they complain that they get campaigned against in an election campaign when they're out there slagging off the government and the Labor Party just as badly every day themselves. Sort of, I didn't say that, even though that they do the same thing. There's an argument that could be made that, an argument that clearly been made, the independent vote was 5% lower than all the polls said it was going to be, including MRS, who are very accurate. Now, you could say that stuff in the last week actually worked to knock the independent vote back. So who would begrudge the government doing that?
Who needs two more at this point in time, though? It's that Maxwell Smart moment where he sits down with whoever it was and says, gee, I hope I wasn't out of line with that crack about you being a megalomaniac, power-hungry maniac.
Of course. But I mean, you want to be in it to win it. And, this
absolutely.
You can't sort of say, let's all be nice to each other, and then we'll end up with, 15 independents. I mean, I just think, as I say, some of these independents need to grow up a little bit and understand that it does cut both ways. And with respect, I think David O'Byrne, who has been in both shoes, clearly understands that in the way that he acts.
Yes, and shows a level of maturity that sees him re-elected.
David, did you get a sense from talking to Carlo DeFalco who he might support? Because I feel fascinating. It's a good story when you've got to get out the asterisks, because he said that he's nobody's B asterisk 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 H. So I'm thinking maybe it's a tribute to Big John. Nobody's Bosh.
That's it.
But
we had a great chat. I really enjoyed, as a first opportunity to have an interview with an incoming political candidate. It was a really great chat. He's very engaged with the issues. We explored, there's obviously a lot more in the 20-minute chat that we had on the lawns yesterday that appeared in the paper. But, we talked about his background with Labor and the rest of it. And I got the very strong feeling from the words that came out of his mouth that he doesn't have any preconceived ideas about who he would rather deal with, and very open mind. And we were talking about sometimes the best deal is no deal at all. So I think he's just going to take it slowly. He's going to take it carefully. I think everyone has the benefit of having seen how things played out just a year ago, and some people were able to get very specific and very detailed commitments out of one party or another, and others winged it. And so there's a range of approaches, and I think he's very alive to all of them. So. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've sort of exercised most of that. We talked a little bit about Marinus. Let's get close.
Well, just on the Marinus, though. Yeah. And I don't hold a candle for Marinus really. I'm not convinced of its benefit for Tasmania or not. But the handling was appalling by the government, the way that they did it. Minister Nick Geigen and ex-Treasurer Guy Barnett, I thought their handling was appalling. Didn't need to be done that way. Labor were going to back it in anyway. I don't know why they had to sort of hold a gun to people's head and say it's going to happen.
Yeah, I thought Dean Winner handled that whole issue very well.
And it sort of reflected to me, and I've observed, it's like the day the campaign ended, they locked Sam McQuestion in a cupboard and went back to fucking things up like they were before when they were in government. It's just like...
Two episodes in a row, Brad's dropped an F-bomb.
Well, it was just like this line. It was like, great campaign,
asterisk.
Then we're back to the same thing. Whereas Labor, it's almost like the opposite. The day the campaign ended, they started to get their shit together.
They did.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but I mean...
well, they said the fast track was dead. And,
Yeah, that's
you know,
right.
it's like what we've been saying. Yeah.
So, it was just... I mean, it clearly cost them Garland's vote. I don't think they were going to have it anyway, but it pushed him away very quickly, and it has put the rest of government at risk for them. So, I think Digan and Barnett do have a lot to answer for, I've got to say.
I read David O'Byrne's post. He was a bit more sympathetic, given the timing, given caretaker mode. But I think if that was going to happen, you needed to telegraph that and say that we've got a timing problem coming up. We've lost Beach. Farewell,
Beach is
Beach.
off to open a runway.
Thank you.
Good luck. I think they had to telegraph that there was going to be a problem in terms of sharing information, and they failed to do that, Brad.
Oh, it was appalling. I mean, it just didn't have to be done that way. And, seriously, you're telling me that the deadline couldn't be changed? The Prime Minister wasn't willing to wait a few weeks because there was an election?
Days might have made all the difference.
Or the cable company wouldn't have held a spot in their machine for a $5 billion contract? I mean, smacks to me of bureaucrats being in charge and common sense going out the window. And that has been the problem with this government all along. Anyway, Becher's had to go, so he's going to miss the conversation. Well, I'm keen to know what Alex thinks. The stadium.
Yes, the stadium. Well, as you just alluded to, now both sides are saying that the fast track is either not dead, but certainly the benefits of the fast track, it's not so fast anymore. So we're going to end up with the TPC POS process, maybe a hybrid model. I'm not sure what we're going to end up with. That's a phrase that has been thrown around, but we're certainly going to see the POS process basically play out now, because the timeline for that is, upon us. Now, there is talk that the TPC might ask for an extension, which would frustrate, I'm sure, everyone who wants a stadium, whether that will be agreed to or whether that'll be even asked for. Have you heard that?
My mail is that they won't. I could be wrong, but my mail is that they won't. I understand they have to report by the 17th of September, I think is the deadline. I'm told they're probably going to report prior to that. I'd put reasonably good money on John Ramsey being the entertainer that he is, that might well be put into the Parliament perhaps to coincide with the first day of sitting and a potential no confidence motion. Just to, wouldn't that go down well?
September 17 would it be the first actual sitting day if we had a ceremonial opening on the 16th?
Yeah, I think
Tuesday.
I think this Parliament will sit closer to the start of the month. But I understand that they're ahead of schedule in terms of preparing the report. But I think you're right, Alex. It'll be. And remember, the POS essentially is a yes or no motion in the Parliament. I think what we'll get will be new legislation that'll take detail from the POS in terms of, conditions and all that sort of stuff, and then perhaps some of the features from the fast tracks bill, like making Erica Betts God so that he can do various other things. I think we're going to get a hybrid piece of legislation. Obviously, it'll pass the lower house, and we're back up to the upper house again to decide what to do with it.
Yeah, and I think the more detail, the better in terms of the upper house. I know people like Dean Harris and Ruth Forrest have said that they'd prefer, the POS process. So
a lot of talk, obviously, about whether the election was a referendum on the stadium. It depends on what camp you're in as to what the answer to that is. What I do know is, and I went back through the data from EMRS's polling during the campaign, is for the first 3 weeks it was the number one issue clearly among voters, unprompted. It's got as high as 22% of all voters as their number one issue. By the end of the campaign, it had fallen to third below health and cost of living. It just drifted away as an issue as the campaign went on, and other
probably because neither major party talked about it.
I think that's exactly right. So, was it a referendum on the stadium? No.
Was it a factor? Yes.
And did it survive the election? Yes. So, it lives to fight another day, and we'll see what happens upstairs.
Well, I think for a lot of people, the stadium has been the first time they've been really actively involved in Tasmanian politics. There's that group, pro-stadium group, 23 or 4,000 people. They were posting every day, who do you vote for, who do you give your preferences to? And all of that benefited the Liberals. Labor found itself in the same position. I think the position that Dean Winner was desperate to avoid after the last election was that you don't benefit from any pro votes and you don't benefit from any anti-votes. And someone very astutely said to me, the only people who know Labor is for the stadium are the antis. So in the end, it hurt Labor. It helped the Liberals because I think in that, and David O'Byrne, I think in that 25 to 50 male age group, the stadium was a big issue, and I think that there was only one place they wanted to park their vote. Well, two, the Liberals or David O'Byrne.
David, any reflection on the stadium?
Yeah, I think it'll come down to the upper house. I think it'll be very close. I think, on my read of where people are at, taking into account the process, the likely look of the legislation, I think it's more likely than not to pass the upper house. I think there's a couple of ways it could still be stuffed up from here. If people remember back to the legislation that went through, or the government attempt to pass on the Ashley Youth Detention Centre replacement, which had a couple of clauses in that the upper house really stuck in their throat. I think if they go too far, if there's a removal of appeal rights, if there's a move, the upper house doesn't, as a chamber that has a lot of former local government representatives in it, there are ways still that it could stumble. But on my read of the sentiment of the people at this point in time, I think it'd be more likely than not to pass the upper house.
And maybe they're the subtle things that some of the crossbenchers might be able to build into any negotiation. Now, I know Craig Garland sort of ruled himself out of the Liberals, but maybe I don't know. I'm not sure what concessions will be given. It certainly won't be, as Peter George wants, take the stadium off the table. I don't think anyone's going to be doing that. But there might be subtle things you can do in terms of transparency or proper process that you can do to appease not just the crossbench but the upper house at the same time.
I think what we're going to get is a bill which is able to be amended, as opposed to the fast track, which was sort of like yes, no. So I think that's
cross stony rise,
and then all we need to do is build it.
Yeah, well, that'd be easy, wouldn't it?
Stadium.
Great. All right. One last thing which we have to remark on, David, in the depths of dark night, while people were distracted by the election and what would happen, the final count, TazWater announced a 40% increase in their prices. Yes.
Quite extraordinary. It's a submission to the Tasmanian Economic Regulator. We have seen these overruled or amended or ruled out by governments before. I think in the electricity space, where governments announced a policy that this is what's going to happen. Slightly different here because we have different shareholders. I think there has been some talk, and my memory fails me on who proposed that we have a change in the arrangements of the shareholdings for TazWater. Is that a Liberal Party policy that the state government takes it over?
Well, we had a very bold and sensible policy back in 2017 for the state government to take over TazWater from the incompetent current owners, local government. Sadly, that policy died after I left the government, and we now have a situation where I believe TazWater's 90% owned by local government and I think 10% owned by the state government.
Yeah, it's a big ask. People, cost of living was a massive issue in this campaign. Look at TazInsure, look at all the policies around, particularly health, where there was an emphasis on cheap access to health. People are doing it tough. I can't see politically how a rise of that nature is palatable. I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be government in 3 weeks' time. So,
well, I think I saw, didn't Joe Palmer say that the government, the Rockliff government, wasn't supportive of the move? But to do it, they'd have to legislate to stop it, I would expect. And that'll upset the councils because last year, councils took 24 million in dividends out of TazWater. This year, 26 million. Next year, 27 million. All the while prices keep going up by 40% for Tasmanian punters. That's out of touch much.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting because without that revenue, they're going to have to look at their rates, and people are getting copying the neck at the other end from rate rises.
Completely specious argument. Anyway, spend less money on rubbish. Anyway, that's about time. As I said, thank you, Becher, for cutting and running. David, any last reflections on where things are going to go before we pull stumps?
Very, very uncertain time. I'd like it to be all a lot more certain and all a lot quicker. People ask me every day, what's going to happen? I say, your guess is as good as mine. And that's no way to run a state. No way to run a government. I'd like to like to think we had some certainty and some speed in resolving this, but I don't think it's coming.
No. Alex?
Yeah, very interesting. George Rose's comments that he was going to wait till the last minute before declaring his hand is admirable in one way, but also leaves a cloud of doubt over things. I think Peter George is going to, be reticent to give support to either side. He's got some very strong feelings. So we could get to a stage where you've nominally got 16, 17 votes on either side, and a couple of people keeping their powder dry. So it's very uncertain. If Labor had have won that 11th seat in Bass, I think we'd be having a different tone to our discussion this morning. But at the moment, it just seems very finely balanced. I think both sides would probably think that they could persuade both George Rose and Carlo DeFalco, but it'll be interesting to see who's the best tactician there. And then Christy Johnston and Peter George, they're going to be pretty shrewd around what they want to get out of this period. So, I don't know. That was a long way to say I don't know, wasn't it?
It's a funny old system, isn't it, where, the line of the Liberal Party was, geez, if we get to 15 seats out of 35, we're home and host, and Labor, if they get to 11, what a time to be alive.
Exactly right. I remember when Peter Gutwin promised with a straight face to resign if he didn't get 18 seats in the 2021 election, and he would have done too. Anyway, a rare episode of Fontcast where there's no firm view on what's going to happen. Fontcast, we'll see. Fontcast is brought to you by Enterprise Marketing and Research Services, Tasmania's leading research provider. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, David. Thank you, Alex. As LinkedIn profile would say, open for opportunities. Is that right? Yes.
My DMs are open.
All right.
I've got a very open mind about what I do next. Yeah.
And he tells jokes too. Don't forget, you can catch us on the YouTube channel Fontcast. It's growing increasingly popular. You can see our ugly mugs. Fontcast is produced and directed by Sam Eichen from Eichen Media. And until next time, carry on.